Why don't we get started? Uh, does anybody know if Michael? I haven't heard from Michael.
He said he was going to
Zoom
zoom
is-
in.
He said he was zooming in virtually, yes.
Okay. How about Mark?
Did not hear back from him.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Bylaw Review Committee meeting of August 24th, 2026. The meeting is taking place in hybrid format with some members in the Great Hall Conference Room at Town Hall. And others on Zoom, including myself. Present this morning are members Vice Chair Andrea Ward, Secretary Marjorie Fryman, Gig Babson, Kristen Welton, and myself, Kenny Lurgis. Also with us are ex officio members Casey Cato, Town Clerk, Megan Jopp, Executive Director, Corey Testa, Assistant Executive Director. And we're expecting Michael Diortenzio to join soon. So we'll open with citizen speak. If anybody, Corey?
Hello, is anyone on the line for citizen speak? Nope.
Right. Next up is the charge. So we presented this to the select board, the modifications that we made the last time, and the select board approved the changes to the charge. So does anybody have any further comments on the charge? Okay, if not,
And just a charge in the packet did not, for some reason, when I accepted the track changes, it did not accept the two changes. It did not accept the change of chair of the select board at the bottom, which I just updated, and the reference to Article 19.14, which the select board did approve. So I just updated it on this Word doc here. So this is what the Bylaw Review Committee approved in July and what the select board approved on August 17th. So I'm sorry that the track change did not accept it. I quickly, Andrea just quickly reminded me before the meeting. So Kenny, this is what the select board approved. Okay.
And so just a reminder, there are a few cleanups in the term town bylaw from general bylaws. Andrea made some cleanup changes, and we removed the section about the voting thresholds, and we made clear that the two members of the select board are appointed by the chair of the select board. So all of that was accepted. This is exactly the same. So if nobody has anything else, could somebody make a motion to approve this?
Move to approve the charge of the Bylaw Review Committee. Second.
Let's see, Marjorie,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
Kristen,
Right.
who else and myself, I vote yes.
I'm on.
Oh, Gig, sorry. I'm looking right at you. Sorry. And Gig.
Yes.
Okay. Now, next on the agenda, we were all going to think about which board's bylaw and which board would be best to be the model bylaw going forward that we would use essentially as the template for all of the other bylaws that essentially organize and set the rules of the road for boards and committees, whether appointed or elected. So I put together a memo just kind of with what my recommendation that explained why, but I would love to hear what everybody else has to say. Or we could start with mine, if that is what you prefer.
I'm just taking a minute to open.
So
Covered a lot of very important points, that it was more complete than some of the other articles. It included information that was included in a lot of other articles. And I think it's a good one to use. We can see how it works when we start expanding the others, because some of the others may not even have addressed some of the topics that should be included in the bylaw.
This one, but I do like the format, although it's interesting because we constantly actually look at COA as one that potentially might be amended. The one thing which I think flows through a lot of them that I think is worth looking at, which to me is worth looking at, what number is COA? Because
33.
I just want to
33.
make sure the language is this, and I was just looking at the bylaw, so. Under, the language is fairly consistent where it says, the council shall appoint a director of senior services and such staff as it deems necessary. So that is a sentence that pervades a lot of the, sections. And it becomes unclear in terms of whether the council or the board, any board or committee is appointing the director. And then are they also appointing the staff? Because how it actually operates is you're appointing the director, and then generally how it truly operates is the director then has the ability to hire their staff. And that's not necessarily clear. And actually as part of the COA, when we had, we were hiring, I think the number 2 or the assistant
The
director.
assistant, yeah.
This came up actually as a point of, well, the COA has to sign off on them, and I was like, why? Because I don't see how that it operates that way. So that's just within the context. That is language that we use fairly consistently, but it's one that actually causes a lot of confusion.
Yeah,
And it could have been meant this way initially, but I think it's changed over time.
That's worth a conversation.
definitely. Gig,
Yes, I just wanted to react to one of your suggestions. I thought it was a great way to look at it all, but I wondered if I'm sorry, I don't have the capacity to also look at your memo right now. And it came out we got it this morning, but as I recall, your suggestion was not to deal with anything that's substantive, and yet we know with the Council on Aging, ultimately there is going to be a substantive issue, I suspect, and therefore, do we have the capacity, and are we willing to go to a group and just get the template right, and then say, okay, you're not ready, we're not ready, the selectmen aren't ready to deal with the issue of membership size. So does that make any difference? We'll be back to them, presumably at another time.
I don't think it should make a difference. I think this is just really a way of getting the bones in place so that we all agree that going forward, here are the topics that are going to be addressed. Here's the language that's going to be used when we're saying the same thing over and over. So I view the template as structural, and I don't think there's going to be a perfect case where there could be perfect case where there's nothing substantive to go back to, but that may have something problematic in it as well. Like it only captures, 3 of the primary topics. And so I don't think there's a perfect one. I spent some time kind of thinking about what might be the perfect one, and this is the best I could come up with when I looked at them all. But yeah, I think it would be a discussion saying, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and this does not preclude us from coming back to the substantive issues. Casey?
Okay.
Well, I'll let you finish this topic first. I mean, I just got a message from Michael. He's running late. He'll join us. He's on another Zoom call that he can't get out of, so.
Okay. Gig, does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes,
Okay.
it does. I don't know that I necessarily agree, but I understand what your process is. So yes, thank you.
I'm open to suggestions on process. I think before you speak, I think we need an overall approach to how we're going to tackle the articles going forward. So that may be part of the discussion is like, maybe we do all the boards and committees, and that's the way that's kind of the second iteration of what we're doing. And in that case, when we're doing the template, maybe we nail the whole thing down for Council on Aging, for example. So
Penny, I think I thought the analysis in the memo was spot on, and I had kind of thrown out in my memo different possibilities and agreed that Council on Aging was one of the top ones. So I'm in sync with you on that. But I do sort of have to confess that as I've been working on all this over the last month, I'm really struggling with us coming forward to fall town meeting with anything. I'm feeling like when you look at other towns or you look at other processes, you would expect a committee convened as we were to take a more holistic and deliberate view of everything. So we may have identified 90% of what we want in a template, but I feel pretty sure that if we were to spend a few more months and break this down, we'd have a better idea of what we want. And so I'm just wondering, are we on the path to presenting a model template in the fall? Because I'm just, I guess, uneasy about that.
I guess in my view, we don't have to bring the model template. I do think it's a good idea that we bring some proposed revisions to even the handful of bylaws, particularly because they don't require a template, so that we have a sense if we're moving in the right direction.
I'll just play devil's advocate for a minute. I mean, when you start looking at, say, Article 1, and you've got definitions and we're adding definitions, doesn't it feel like if we take a few months and review, we're likely to find other terms we want to add? And I just wonder, if I were a town meeting member and I was asked to do this, but then 12 months from now, we had updates to that. Just in like sort of looking around at other towns, they're taking these kinds of constituted committees are taking a longer period to review. And then they're coming with, and I understand very clearly the point about we can't dump the whole thing on town meeting at once, but I'm just saying, maybe like everything we've done is so useful, but maybe we stretch it longer, do further deliberation with a work plan that comes, I don't know, I don't want to suggest something, but next possibly annual or possibly next fall town meeting with our first trial balloons. And if we need to socialize, could we not do a report to special town meeting that lays out our thinking and our timeline and give them a heads up? I know the idea was we couldn't do anything like that without anything substantive in front of town meeting without an article before us, but are there other ways to start to socialize? So I'm sorry, but I felt I had to kind of get that out on the table.
Gig?
I asked for this to go on the agenda, but maybe this is, and I'm not sure that it did get on the agenda, but this might be a way to get at it. I may be wrong. I don't think I am. I don't think that there are any standing committees, any committees named in the bylaw that haven't been approved and established by town meeting. And whether I realize that our authority stems from one of the bylaws that allows the Board of Selectmen to have an advisory committee. But one way you could get in front of town meeting, if you wanted to, for the fall, unless it turns out to be too controversial, is to make this a standing committee in the bylaws and bring the charge and bring the work plan so that town meeting has an understanding of what our approach is going to be and the deliberateness of the work that's going to get done. So it's another way to
So you
meet what
salad,
Andrea had
ciabatta roll.
suggested.
Casey?
I just heard chicken salad on a ciabatta roll and I got
Yep.
hungry. But anyway, sorry. So actually, Gig, I think you bring up a really interesting point is in that to use the formation of the committee as a means to being on the warrant and getting in front of town meeting. Just one thing from kind of an operational perspective. Let's say we actually put forward a few changes or a template change or whatever, some changes in whatever bylaw in November. Then a week later, I would submit that to the AG. We wouldn't hear back till around November, 3 months later, so 90 days,
February.
end of February. And they'll either approve it or not approve it. And then, but then we'll have already gone on to kind of because what I didn't know was kind of what's the whole, it was the thought that we would put some things forward in November and then put some things forward in March and then put some things forward in, and so by doing it little pieces, there's a little bit of a freeze on some things depending on the AG process, because of the AG process. So we may want to have more pieces versus just some and then go. And so it becomes more challenging to kind of keep track of it all and know what we can change and what we can't change and what we lock in and what we don't.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
I would just what I really liked about the idea of bringing something sooner is the idea of, and you mentioned like maybe we could do a memo or something. I feel like it's hard for people to really engage until they have to sign up for something. And so conceptually, it might be like people are like, it sounds okay. But then when it's really time to make the call, I think that's when people are like, well, wait a second, maybe I do want to understand something better. So that's what I liked about at least having something of a trigger to come to the fall meeting. And we had talked about, for example, the decision or the question around whether we move from, and I don't know that we totally landed the plane on this, but whether we move from having some retelling of state law in this or state statutes, or do we just reference, that was going to be a big change that we were going to put through this. And so, how far do we want to go down a road with an assumption of approval versus at least getting, if we can, maybe it's not a specific board that could, put on the table, though I think having it be real just makes it more tangible. But the idea of having some intentions that we believe we would follow, and maybe it's to your point again, maybe we don't know everything, and so maybe we have to be really thoughtful about what the intentions are, but something, if there are some overarching structural decisions that we're making that we would expect to flow through the entire process to get approval on that up front, rather than finding out much further down the road that that's not palatable, is helpful. Now, if we end up deciding that there really isn't anything that dramatic, that, for example, switching to links, for whatever reason we think won't be that disruptive, then maybe it's not important. But that was what I had in my mind for this, is that it's an opportunity to test drive a couple of the bigger and more universal changes that we might be making, to make sure we don't go down a path too far without some show of advocacy for it.
Mark? You're on mute, Mark.
Okay, am I on?
You're on.
Okay, yeah. I'm aware now that there are 2 citizen petitions for the fall town meeting. And that's certainly going to complicate things, I think, in terms of the time. So I just think we want to be very careful about not putting something before the town meeting that, is going to take up a big block of time because I think we've got 3 nights, and those citizen petitions might engender an awful lot of discussion. So my thought would be, I think it's important to get some sense of how the town meeting is going to respond to this. And if we just went with something that's really of sort of a technical nature, like the open meetings and the meetings in executive session, just to get some sense of how the town meeting is going to be reacting to the modifications of the bylaw. And then following up, I think it was Gig made the suggestion on this committee making some sort of report to the town meeting, as an appendix to the advisory report, indicating what the plan is going forward. So in that way, we have the town meeting sort of tuned in, and also we'll be able to get some sense from the AG's reaction to the bylaw amendment as to whether we're on the right track there. So that's sort of my suggestion, listening to this part of the discussion.
So the idea is to essentially socialize the concept, and the way to do it is by putting something probably very non-controversial, something apolitical. It's just going to be a decision about, do you want to cross-reference the statute or do you want a description?
Exactly.
And then that allows us to do the report, to stick something in the advisory report.
Exactly.
Yeah. My sense, Marjorie, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm very wary of bringing anything substantive within a particular article, because I think we're going to find after a few months of review that references are more that have more implications than we might think initially. And we don't want to have to go back and say, oh, well, we found something, so we're going to undo what we already did and do something else. I don't think that would reflect well on the committee. Something apolitical that every board or every committee deals with, like open meeting law or executive session or minutes or something like that, be a good start. And it also gives us an opportunity to introduce the committee to the rest of town meeting, because not everybody even knows who we are or what we're charged with.
Right. So my sense from the discussion, and I agree. I like what Mark's idea was, because I think it is important to get something in front, even if it's just merely a way of presenting the concept to town meeting. I think that's a good idea. I agree with what everybody said. Andrea's point about, pump the brakes and make sure we have our arms around the whole thing, even if we're going to then introduce it in pieces, I think makes a lot of sense. And kind of to what Marjorie was just suggesting, which is you don't want to go in front and then have to turn around and unwind something you did. So I guess my view is we take, say, Article 2 and 2A and deal with those. And in my opinion, that's basically saying cross-reference the statute for the majority of it. And then I think that's Article 2. And then there's some Wellesley specific things in there as well, a few Wellesley specific, and deal with those or keep those as is. And then for 2A, just cross-reference the statute and use that as a springboard to have the discussion. And we focus between now and then on what that discussion looks like and setting up a work plan, I guess, to try to get to annual town meeting with something more robust. What do people think about that?
I think that's great. I like Mark's, personally, I like Mark's idea. I'm comfortable that if we do something, if we come to an agreement on 2 and 2A, which is going to be largely this linking to state law, and possibly we're offering that we'll put something in the town clerk's page explaining for citizens the open meeting law, which many other towns have. I think that we're not gonna get into too much trouble later on with what we uncover. And I love the idea, of the report to special town meeting. I think that's a way we get in other information about ourselves, our goals, our timeline, and I think as a town meeting member, I'd be very receptive to both of those things.
Okay. Casey?
So I agree with the approach. It doesn't prevent us from starting on COA and developing a template and all that other kind of stuff. So we can still be doing that as we, kind of parse out what we're gonna do to present to town meeting. I also think practically speaking, based on the advisory schedule, they want us ready to go to present to them within the next month. And given where we are, we probably aren't ready to do a template anyway for that. My guess at town meeting, what may happen is the kind of our authority position. Because I think that's what ends up being where town meeting is a little divided on how much broad authority the select board has or doesn't have. Right. So, I mean, my guess is that it may come around to that discussion. And
Yeah.
that may be what takes time.
Just, I did speak to town council after our last meeting,
Mhm.
and he was very comfortable that the way we've constituted this is clearly, the select board had the authority to do it this way.
Oh, no. I completely agree that we legally have the select board legally has the authority to do that. That doesn't mean that there won't be discussion on town meeting floor about whether, even though you can legally do it, should you do it?
Right.
Versus having it be appointed by town meeting.
Yeah.
I'd like to follow up. I've raised this 3 times now, and we still don't have a discussion about it. I'd really like to hear what people think about establishing ourselves as a committee and having town meeting approve it to avoid exactly what Casey is discussing. We have the authority as a committee. There's authority for the selectmen to appoint us. Is it premature? Are there too many issues related to the past that going forward to get a bylaw, having a bylaw review committee like many towns do, is that just fraught with issues and not the proper way to start? I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
What do
don't
people think
mind.
are the pros and cons of that? What's your view, Gig, on the pros and cons of that?
Well, I think that what Casey said is accurate. There are going to be some people that wonder about the selectmen and the selectmen using this as a way to start making bylaw changes. I think that's number one. Number two, that most committees that operate, I mean, that's not always the case with committees that come to town meeting, but they're established by the bylaw. We're doing bylaws. Why wouldn't we be established by a bylaw? But I think that the flip side of it is, it might be controversial. People might look at the charge and say, oh, look what they're doing. It just may not be worth taking that on right now.
The select board has clear authority to establish an advisory committee. I'm not really sure why we need to take the establishment of a committee that the select board voted to town meeting. I would rather see us take something, assuming our authority and bringing something that every board and committee deals with and starting there.
Anybody else have a view? Mark?
Yeah, I think the idea of having the bylaw committee as a standing committee One thing that will do it, A, it'll generate discussion, but B, presumably it will be accepted. You then have buy-in from the town meeting. So I sort of like that idea.
Which specifically, what are you saying?
To establish it as a standing committee.
For the bylaws, within the bylaws.
Yeah. But question, is the whatever is on the warrant for this committee, is it broad enough to encompass something like that?
Not yet.
We could make it be so. The only question I would raise is, well, there are two things for consideration. One, the select board actually had this debate and came to the conclusion that they wanted to do it in the current configuration. The second being whether the debate at town meeting then becomes this notion of whether the select board has the authority to do this, which is the better way, rather than focusing on the bylaws themselves.
Exactly.
So to me, it's a distraction rather than looking at the bylaws. But however the select board wants to proceed, we'll see that.
And to Megan's point, will this become, will this become the vehicle by which town meeting members use the floor to debate a potential, like this is actually certain members of the select board or the select board trying to put a standing committee for a town government study committee? That's really what this is. They're just saying they're narrowly focusing on reviewing the bylaws, but really this is, they're going to use it as the basis for debate, to Megan's point, away from the merits of the actual substance that we're bringing to town meeting. Which is something that Gig brought up. She said, that's the flip side. It might be controversial. It could lead to debate beyond the scope of what we want them to discuss.
I do think that one thing that might come out of our review is a recommendation for a bylaw that establishes periodic review, which other towns have. So I think we may get there and we may say, we think it would be really helpful coming out of this process to establish a process which then town meeting would set up and the bylaw would change. So I'm comfortable moving forward the way we are now, given that that option is available to us later.
I like that.
I agree with that too. I also like the idea that ultimately we might get to something that has some permanence, so that it's not, every once in a while somebody decides to look at the bylaws and then it's this holistic refresh. The idea, I'm going a little out of scope now, but where my head is this, the idea of having something that where somebody sort of have their finger on the pulse of this with more sort of steady state approach, to me is a very attractive end state after this holistic refresh.
And looking at Article 2 and 2A is very clear about some of the purpose for this review in the first place. It's confusing to cite statutory sections when the statutes may change. And we recognize that we could be out of compliance by including it in our bylaws. It's a very clear bylaw review, standard bylaw review process by which you say, is this clear? Is it arbitrary? Could it be unenforceable? That's how we established ourselves as the review committee. And it's hard to argue. I mean, you can say, well, people really want the statutory citation, but if it changes, you're out of compliance. It's a very easy thing to understand. And maybe some town meeting members will see, oh, okay, they really are looking at the bylaws as a way to improve them, as opposed to a subterfuge to get to a result they're not really telling us about.
So Andrea, go ahead, Casey.
Are you concerned, as I'm asking Kenny and Marjorie, are you concerned if you were to go forward at town meeting and ask to set this up, town meeting wouldn't support it?
I think it's going to create a conversation that's completely beside the point. And not focus on the work we want to do. And I don't understand the need for it. I mean, any other committee that has the authority to establish an advisory committee can do so without going to town meeting. I think the town meeting's role here is to agree with bylaw changes or not.
I think there will be pushback and by some people. My sense is that a majority of town meeting will say this is a good idea. It doesn't make sense not to periodically review some of these things because they're dated and sometimes they're broken. So I certainly think there'll be pushback.
I
But
guess I'd rather
Andrea's-
have the pushback earlier than after a year's worth of work.
Well, to Andrea's point, or what you're saying, Andrea, essentially keep this punt on this particular question. But make it clear that this is one of the potential options to be revisited, to be discussed at town meeting, the annual town meeting.
I'm sorry, I'm just confused by what you're at. Can you just rephrase the question?
So when you said, when you made your comment, are you suggesting that we continue the way we're going, but make town meeting aware that this is one of the topics that we're discussing and it may come up later,
This being,
the standing committee?
oh, right, no, I don't know. I have to think through whether you raise that issue, but I'm saying we as a group know that it's a possibility, and so we may decide that after all the work we've done for the first time cohesively in years, we should have something set up going forward. So, I mean, I don't know that we have to say up front, we're considering the establishment of such, but I think we know it and we may choose it. A bunch of other towns have every 5 years, we do 2 articles a year that we refresh. I mean, there's all different ways you can institute a formal process that would have the standing committee imprimatur or whatever, so.
And I'll have a better sense of whether it should be standing or periodic or every year that ends in a 5 or a 0 or something like that after we do some work.
Is the concern I'm hearing maybe from Mark or Dick that it was established by the select board rather than town meeting?
Yeah, so I have to follow up on that very issue. What is sort of our plan? Whatever we do, we vote by a majority vote, we hand it over to the selectmen. Who's presenting it to town meeting? The selectmen on the advice of a bylaw advisory committee that they've set up? Is that, because I do think we should be thinking about that part when we come to whatever decision we're going to come to.
That's how I envisioned it, Marjorie.
I think the committee was established to make recommendations to the select board for the select board to present.
Right.
Okay, so okay.
Mark, did you have any other thoughts on that?
No. Just listening to the debate, I think the point Marjorie just made is the correct one. In other words, this committee is just an advisory committee to select board. The select board then has to debate what's submitted and decide whether to submit to town meeting. Is that where we're going?
Well, and it may be a joint article, for example, the COA. If the COA determines that they want to do something to their membership or their practice, it
Okay,
may just be a joint
okay.
and that particular board
Right,
presents.
Yeah. But my focus right now is on the fall special, and there wouldn't be any other existing board that would have involvement in that if we limit it to the
Exactly.
open meeting. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there any way that anyone can think of that, just using the example of the 2 and 2A, is that controversial? the notion of, I mean, is there any angle to
No,
that?
I mean, we're required by law to do it, bottom line, right? So it's just, I think the piece that we have to decide is, do we just list out the MGL and put links in it, or do we reiterate the whole thing? Right? Because it's not, we
Yeah,
can't change the substance of the law.
I think we've decided that we're going to just not restate the law. We're gonna say open meeting is governed by Massachusetts general law and add the hyperlink. Does anybody have a different view of that? My thought was that was decided.
I think it was decided. I personally continue to equivocate in my mind because every time I look at this, I find it so helpful. It's like, it's so practical, it's so like attainable. And I just, so as I put in my comments for this time, like I'm completely connected with, and I think it ultimately is the right thing to say. We cannot be restating law in here and risk then creating an inadvertent break. So I'm completely on board with that. And so what I've just been wrestling with is there a way then to do what this is doing so effectively? Because we can connect to law, we can connect to the training materials, and I think nobody mostly will look at it. And I think understanding open meeting law, and for the general person in Wellesley to understand that my language might not be correct, that they have rights around this kind of stuff. I just think it's really important. If we want people to be engaged, it's important that they understand that there are some just base operating standards, if you will. And so that's what I like so much about this. And I am concerned that if we do what I agree is the right thing and not try and restate law, if that's all that we do, that we have lost something that's very practically beneficial to people being involved in the town.
And maybe the way we deal with that is on the website where we have the bylaws, we have something that explains certain ones that is dated a specific date and that says this is accurate as of this date. We're not repping to the fact that this continues to be accurate, but on this date it was accurate.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about we could make something like insofar as there's ever, I don't know this a lot. Insofar as there's ever a conflict with the law prevails. Do we say this is not the law, this is how we are operating within the law? Is there language that we can wrap around it to make that distinction, which is really important, but still provide people with very common speak tools and understanding?
Is it more like a procedure?
I mean, it seems like operating procedures, operating something is what came to mind, and I think that's the heart of what this gets at, is just
Before the meeting, you should do this if you're gonna
Yeah.
record.
and just be aware that this is what you can expect from your town as well, right? You can expect that you're allowed to go to these meetings, because I think even stuff like that is maybe not as obvious as it might be to people who are immersed. It might not be obvious that people have the right to show up at meetings or have access to it.
I actually think an explanation is, to that point, is more helpful than the actual bylaws, because I don't know. I think a lot of people read bylaws or law in general and think, I'm sure I'm missing something because this is what lawyers do. Even though it says clearly certain things, but Michael has joined. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
What have you seen have you ever seen other towns deal with this particular issue?
Thanks, Kenny, and sorry for the delay, everyone. I got stuck on a long Zoom court hearing. If I was understanding the question, this was relative to the detail around the open meeting law in the bylaw. Is that right?
It's the more general, are we going to restate the law or summarize the law, or are we going to just cross-reference?
So I would say it's sort of all over the map across the state, with the trend being towards cross-referencing. The reason for that being that there have just been, particularly since the open meeting law was revised in 2010 or 11 and the public records law in 2016, more and more clients have kind of said, we're not going to be able to keep up with these changes. Particularly with the open meeting law, there is a whole body of administrative decisions that are issued by the Division of Open Government that really the law doesn't capture, right? You wouldn't know that detail. And so there have been times where clients have said, well, I read the bylaw and it says this, and they'll get a letter from us that says, well, yes, but there's more out there that doesn't capture. And so more and more people have been pointing to, the guide or other materials that we didn't write, since we're not liable for it. But I can't say that's 100%. It really does vary. That's just the trend.
One of the other questions was, okay, if you go to the cross-reference, what are towns doing that take that approach to allow people to meaningfully understand the substance of, say, the open meeting law? Are they putting summaries or like some type of narrative that allows people to understand it? And if so, where?
What I'm most often seeing is a little blurb, which I know we have on a lot of our agendas already. But what towns have done is they've added blurbs on their agenda postings. More and more towns, sort of the town clerk has kind of come up with a common agenda posting to make sure that people are in compliance. I don't know that we need that here, but what they've done is they've had a blurb at the bottom that says, this is, we encourage public comment. All of our meetings are open except in executive session. Kind of the key things that, members of the public might need to understand versus the more detailed things that they probably don't need to know that are in the open meeting law.
Yeah.
It's more of an issue, I think, if you're reading the hard copy. If you're online and you have a hyperlink, you can go right to the MGL. If you're reading a hard copy, it's harder. Casey, how often do you reprint the bylaws?
The bylaws? Our town bylaws, I reprint probably every couple of years, every 2 years, some of it's dependent on how much change there's been. But
Because
typically
thinking about what Kristen said, if we cite MGL, let's say on open meeting law, one idea could be to put the substance or the explanation in an appendix and say it's effective as of this date, but check for future updates. I think it's harder for people reading the hard copy, but Casey said she doesn't give out that many hard copies.
no, we don't. I mean, we give them away to everybody who joins advisory, but half of them don't want it anyway. We do not sell many.
So most people would be looking at the online, bless you, and have
Right.
the hyperlink right there and can go right to the MGL. Question is whether that is sufficient to explain whatever their question may be.
Right. I mean, what we also do is, if somebody asks me, because they'll, they read the bylaw and then we say, oh, there's been some, and so the bylaws, even though I print every 2 years, it doesn't mean that we are updating them every 2 years, right? So we update them when we update them. And so we have not been updating them every time the law changed due to COVID. I mean, the open meeting law changed. There's been a bunch of different changes and iterations, and they're temporary because they've done these extensions. And so we did not rewrite our bylaw to incorporate that. So in addition to providing the MGL, if people call up and ask, I, send them links to, the mass.gov page that has, guidance on remote meetings and other determinations. And they have a FAQ section because there's some, which I think is probably more helpful. And that's what I use, honestly, for when I have questions about open meeting law, because it has changed and how do you interpret it? And that's probably the better route to get what the interpretations are, because they're kind of evolving.
And actually, Casey, to your point on the FAQs, I think one of the things that I put in my notes is if the answer is ultimately to just say, look, we're going to link to the law and that's it because of the risks, there are other tools that are provided. And I know that this is a little bit of hand holding, but again, I think the goal being that people understand and that people aren't intimidated out of engaging, like connecting directly to, I think there's like a training materials on this or anything that just helps to connect to plain speak, because even like going to the actual regulations, like I have it open and I'm looking at it, this does not encourage involvement, right? Like this is like, I gotta make it pretty far and then, right? So I feel like it doesn't achieve what we want, which is understanding and the opportunity for engagement.
I think that highlights an issue because when you look at the Mass General Law that is supposed to say the exact same thing as the bylaw, if what we've done is summarized in some way or made it pick different words to try to say the same thing to make it more readable, we might have created a problem in doing that.
I totally accept that problem. And I understand that, you know, everything we've discussed, that we can't intentionally create that risk of misstating, even if it is with good intentions. And so I guess I'm just was trying to brainstorm, are there other ways to still achieve the kind of attainability of what's currently in the bylaws without creating the risk? So we're not just going singularly to a hyperlink to the law, but is there anything else that can facilitate it, either repositioning as operating procedures, like you said, Megan, or linking to state issue training materials? Just, and I know that people can do this themselves, but each step, I think, reduces the chance that somebody finds their way, and I think we want them to find their way.
I think in a lot of these where, and I don't know this one for certain, but I think the state provides summaries of a lot of these laws on their own website.
Right.
I'm trying to think of the one I looked at the other day. It wasn't related to this, but it sort of gave you the primer on the issue. And like, is that what you're talking about, Kristen? Because that, to me, that's helpful. It gives me a level of understanding before, and if you need to get into the minutia, you have to read the law. But
Yes.
just no idea.
That kind of, exactly, Kenny, and they do have FAQs on there. They have an open meeting law guide, educational materials, and newsletter, and I mean, I know I've belabored this point, so I'll stop, but I hope we can find a way to meet the need of not knowingly creating risk by restating the law, but still achieving this very understandable and consumable content in some way.
Andrea?
So, Needham, and I think Lexington and Concord, but I looked a few weeks ago, they don't even have any articles that mirror ours. They don't have anything in the bylaws about open meeting law. But Needham has sort of a, well, you can look it up, but it's under the town clerk's office. And it does, I think, do some of that explanatory. It's an open meeting law guide, and it has different things about covered meetings, posting notices, executive sessions. So they've turned the educational function over to the town, to the webpage. And I guess you could debate where to locate it on the webpage, but I don't want to get too much into the weeds if this isn't the right time. But when we say we're going to restate MGL, are we actually going to sort of retain Article 2, open meeting law, and then have a statutory site, or are we just deleting the whole thing from the website? Because I think Michael, when I read his edits, it looked like it was delete.
Michael, what's your view on that?
I had suggested deleting it simply because my view is that we want the bylaws to provide rules for the operation of the town that don't exist elsewhere, right? That we're sort of controlling, as we had discussed. But I think we could also keep Article 2. We probably don't need 2A, but we could keep Article 2 and include links to, really just a statement of the open meeting law applies to members of all, it applies to all multiple member boards. And here is a link to more information. I think that would also be appropriate. And I see towns do that.
Well, in Article 2 also has to Michael's point, like our unique provisions with regards to the regulations for video recording of town meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Although arguably it could potentially be moved somewhere.
Or that just becomes your Article 2. and then you
Yeah.
don't need,
So as a
because-
general rule, it sounds like there's general agreement on cross-reference the bylaw and have some type of educational material on the website that allows people to consume the information they need to have an understanding of what the issue is. Is that
Yes.
fair to say?
I would agree with that.
I think that's a good approach. I think when we're cross-referencing each time, we have to think about, I think if all we're doing is literally verbatim restating it, like executive session, that should probably come out. If on the open meeting law, there's some town-specific stuff, we might want to just cross-reference initially and then state the town-specific provisions.
so open meeting law includes executive session
Yes, exactly.
and minutes.
Mhm.
So we actually didn't ever need to have 3 different sections, but with different numbers.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Michael?
Just to agree with what Casey was saying, and you know, if I could draw a corollary later on, I know we'll get to this in the future, to the conflict of interest law. The way I kind of think about the difference is the open meeting law is the open meeting law, and it is what it is. We don't really have any control over it. We've done our own supplementary relative to regulation and recording of meetings, but otherwise we don't have any control over the open meeting law, right? The conflict of interest law is the same, except that has a provision that says that cities and towns can create more stringent conflict rules than the state. And so that's what we've gone ahead and done in part in that later section. I think somewhere in section 6 or 7. And so the way I kind of think of it is, you know, when we have these state laws, if we have it as, you know, this law exists, right? Because to Casey's point, the open meeting law covers meetings, executive sessions, and minutes, right? That's all specified in the law. What we can say is this law exists and it applies. And then here is any additional supplementary local regulation, because that's really what we need to call out.
Okay, so we agree on that approach?
Mhm.
Okay. In my view, if we're gonna bring these two to town meeting, I suggest we bring this to town council and say, this is what we're trying to do, instead of, I don't think there's any reason that we all need to comment on this, and I think the direction is pretty clear. We can tell town council, this is what we wanted, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Draft an amended bylaw that does that. What do people think of that?
Great.
Okay,
So would minutes be included or not included? So you say the 2, but once we're creating a link to open meeting law, I think Michael might have said that does include minutes, so just 3
It
just
does.
get wrapped up in this as well.
yeah, 3 gets pulled in, so it's article,
So 2, 2A and 3 become consolidated and is a reference to the law. And with the addition of the recording of meetings regulations promulgated by the select board.
yes. Okay, so that's one thing that we need to do. We need to get the warrant article drafted. We need to start thinking about a presentation explaining who we are and what our what our goal is.
And are there any items on the warrant that fall within our charge to review bylaw suggestions?
There's an advisory one.
Yeah, there is an advisory one, yeah. So which is with regards to,
Mailing.
the advisory language is to see if the town will vote to modify the requirements for delivery or mailing of the advisory report to town meeting by amending Article 11.
Saves them the printer time.
Sure. We just, but the others. I think that's the only bylaw one that I think I have. Actually,
Is one of, oh no, that's a zoning bylaw, so no, right?
no, the other, if we create a stabilization fund, I'm forgetting if that's a bylaw.
Yeah.
No, it's just a fund and we keep it on record. Is that right, Michael?
Yeah, the revolving funds have to be in the bylaw, but the stabilization do not.
Okay, so then that's the only one.
So what's our process for that advisory one? It has to come to us, we review it and vote on it.
But once we got the motion language, we would need the motion language. Motion language is due September 25th. So as soon as we receive that motion language, we will forward that along.
Yeah,
But does it have to be reviewed by us before they lock in their motion language?
Let's look at the charge.
Through, because
Because if we review it and there's changes, then they have to change it and.
We were gonna submit to town council proposed bylaw amendments for review. Although advisory technically would do that for form and substance too.
But does this committee need to see it before or after, or what stage of the process?
Well, I just see it says, consider all articles in the warrant for any town meeting which propose an amendment of or addition to the town bylaws and recommend revisions for clarity, enforceability, and consistency.
yeah,
And we'd probably make that recommendation or determination to the select board. Correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Because it's not just ours. And so we give it to the select board. So the select board should have that information before they opine on it.
we would then have to basically speak to, in this case, advisory.
Hearing.
Right. So we need to do that before the advisory public hearing,
Which is October
second,
7th.
Of October?
Yes.
And so who's presenting all of this all the way along? Is it this committee that's going to go to advisory committee and say, here are the suggested changes? Or is it going to be the selectmen? The selectmen going to present it to town meeting? Why aren't the selectmen going to advisory with it?
Well, as a matter of fact, so Alyssa sent us some dates for the select board articles, and I did raise that as something that we would present. Anything to the town bylaw review committee. From the town bylaw review committee.
So it no longer becomes each board's bylaw amendment?
No, I think it's the board bylaw amendment. What it is consider proposed amendment. So I think this body would make a recommendation to the select board. The select board would say, hey, advisory, we ran this through our town bylaw review committee, and either the select board's in agreement or not. And here's the recommendation. I mean, advisory still has its role to perform. This wouldn't.
it would go in the advisory report. I don't think the select board needs to present. They could answer questions, but they don't need to present.
Right.
So is this a mechanism for any board that wants to make a bylaw change? Will now go through the bylaw review committee and the select board before they go to advisory?
Well, and some of it could be to form, right, in terms of the motion language.
No, I understand. I mean, I understand. I'm just, it could be, and that'd be great because currently, individual boards do their own thing, submit their motion. I kind of see it at the end and I'm like, look at that. We don't have it in the right order. But so I welcome it, but personally, it's a change. And so I'm just trying to make sure we clearly articulate what the process is now or will be.
I think that is correct. I think the process that Megan laid out for this one is what we have to do. And I think we need to come up with a clear process of how this will work going forward. But I think that this works for that particular one.
I think you also have to address the question that the issue that was raised a few minutes ago, which is, you see this as an opportunity to set forth to town meeting what this committee is going to, what this committee is going to do, what its work plan is going to do. How's that going to happen? Are they going to hear from this committee? Are they going to hear from the selectmen? Or do we just submit a report in the advisory committee that's from this committee? I think these issues, all of them have to be carefully thought through, really, because there are going to be ramifications.
I mean, I think that
Agreed.
this charge is pretty clear that you consider it, you propose an amendment, you recommend revisions for clarity, enforceability, consistency. We report that to town meeting. And assist the town clerk in preparing updates.
No. I mean, but we don't report that to town meeting. We report it to
Put it to the
the select
selectmen.
board.
I mean, that's the issue, right?
And then the select board, then they report it to town meeting?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what Marjorie just said. Kenny just
Under
said.
here, it indicates that it reports its vote to town meeting.
Megan's just quoting the charge.
That's right.
Okay, so
The question is, are we reviewing for internal consistency, enforceability, all the things that we listed, or is this committee going to look at the substance of the bylaw or bylaw amendment? Because we talked early on about whether we were going to do policy reviews of bylaws or the more logistical, enforceable, internally consistent, legible, understandable.
The charge speaks to the more narrower scope, clarity, enforceability, and consistency. It seems like that would be the place where I would start at this point. And we may have the knowledge to say, oh, well, you're talking about mailing and that has implications that we can see down the road for other things. So perhaps think about this, but I would stick to what
I agree.
what we're charged with.
I think that needs to be clearly understood.
So I read bullet 2 and the third to the bottom slightly different. So to me, the third one to the bottom says, consider all articles in the warrant for any town meeting which proposes an amendment or addition to the bylaw and recommend revisions for clarity, enforceability, consistency with the bylaw and applicable law. I was reading that to be the article itself.
Right, but not the policy of the board. It would be the bylaw.
So I was reading that as somebody's going to present an article to us that proposes the bylaw amendment, and we're going to make sure it checks those boxes, whereas bullet 2 seems slightly broader. There's no qualifiers or limiting factors on bullet 2.
Bullet 2 meaning bullet 2 from the bottom?
2 from the top, sorry.
So like bullet 2 from the top is the substance of the bylaw and bullet 3 from the bottom is just how they're presenting it
Yes,
for approval, is what you're saying.
that's how I'm reading it. Otherwise, they seem inconsistent to me.
I guess with the third from the bottom, it doesn't clarify if the revisions are to the amendment or to the.
Right.
Well, and I do think there's two ways to look at that, because there could be a proposed amendment, but it's like, well, if we're looking at it and we're looking at a change to form in terms of, so it might not be substantive, but we might change it to the particular form that we were looking for, is one way to look at it.
Right.
Since you're touching it. Casey and I have a few of those where it's like, well, if you weren't touching it, there is a couple.
Right. This is
Minor.
what I would change, right? But we do that sometimes.
Yeah.
But we do it as kind of
Like
not
a
a
friendly
recommendation
amendment.
because we have no authority.
Yeah.
This is different. I mean, but
Well, we don't have to maybe be so tied up in knots on this, because what's coming to us is a mail, I think, right? I mean, we're
The
probably,
digitization.
we can maybe let this play out a little, and yeah.
Yes.
right. And so maybe we go in as one thing, and then, I mean, the form and the clarity, enforceability, consistency, we weigh in on, and that has more authority by our committee. But then the kind of, oh, well, you know, have you thought of this, or would you consider this? Those kinds of things are just suggestions, not.
Well, I think some of the language was put this way because we don't want to undermine the advisory committee's role. That being said, this article is being put forward by the advisory committee.
Right.
So therefore, maybe it necessitates a stronger review.
Right.
I mean, I think it's gonna be a fine article, but I'm in those instances, when the recommending authority to town meeting is the one putting it forward, it's a bit of a conflict.
Okay, so the things that I see in the immediate that need to be done in the short term, if we're going to do something for town meeting, special town meeting, are get town council to revise articles 2, 2A, and 3.
Mhm.
Get the warrant, the article language correct, which I guess town council can do in connection with the first point, and then work on a presentation that explains who we are and what we're doing. And I think that process, to what Gig was saying, will highlight flaws in our process that we're going to have to be able to explain to town meeting.
No, wait. Tell me, how is it that you get on the floor of town meeting?
Right.
I mean, we've just decided that the selectmen are making the presentation, and we are not the sponsors. So we are not, unless Mark is going to change rules that have been in existence forever, we're not going to get on the floor of town meeting. We can submit a report, but we're not going to get on the floor unless we can think of a different way to do that. It's Mark, is that how you look at that? You're on mute.
I do. So select board is the presenter.
So
Isn't it sort of semantics?
it's not semantics. And I just want to raise one other issue as we think through this. If part of the issue, we have two separate issues. Do the selectmen have the authority to do this? Are they taking on a job that they think is important and they're assigning to an advisory committee? That's one issue. The other issue that we've been talking about is, do we want to establish credibility? Do we want the town meeting to see this is, you know what, a group that is really with it and they've got a thoughtful process to move us along? They're not going to see, they're going to see it only through you as the selectman and the chairman of the committee. That might be exactly the way to do it, but they will be seeing you as the selectman, not as the chair of this particular committee. And everybody can say it's semantics, but believe me, you get to town meeting and people are going to focus on these issues, and whatever we do is fine as long as we really think it through and see where the hurdles might be. That's all.
Okay, so in any event, we're going to do a report no matter what.
Right.
So we can start doing the report and figure out what the presentation, because that's going to derive from the report. So, okay. So for the next meeting, we will have the articles, the warrant language, and some version of a report of who we are and what we're doing that people can start looking at.
I think that makes sense, Kenny, and that's probably a good time we can discuss more about the mechanics then. We'll all have had some more time to reflect on it. We'll have the materials with us. Probably
Yeah.
worth putting on the agenda.
So the select board's gonna sign the warrant on the 8th.
I was wondering, Kenny, is it possible for us to have few more meeting, like to accelerate our meeting schedule? And because I think one of the things I think we have things to do, but we also need to talk about, I think the report should have a time frame in it of, and some work plan that we can share. And I think we have to agree on that and possibly come up with a methodology. It feels like a lot to wait another month to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's see. So we need to have one before September 8th.
Well, maybe the first. No, just kidding.
We can meet in your office, Casey, at Town
Sure.
Hall.
You can come with me on the car ride around to all the precincts.
But I agree with you meeting before then if possible. And Andrea, I think that's a good point because I think Gig's point on the specifics here of, who is the sponsor, the presentation, what does that look like? I don't have the answers to those to that right now, but I think they're very good questions. And I do think town meeting members will pay attention to that. So I want to agree with Gig on that.
I don't know that we're going to be in a position to have a report by September 3rd to even look at. But I think we could approve presumably the language for the articles and the warrant language by September 3rd.
Who's drafting the report?
I'll take the first shot at it.
I just emailed Melissa to see what the deadline would be for the report. So I'll let you all know the deadline.
I think we need some framework just to at least kickstart the conversation. So
I do
I'll
too.
take a shot at that. Does September 3rd work for people? I don't think it'll take more than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
What time are you looking at
Yeah.
on the 3rd?
Yeah. What time?
Could people do 2 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay, let's do 2 o'clock on September 3rd.
Wait, you said on Thursday the 3rd?
Yeah.
Yes,
Right, could we do either an hour earlier or an hour later?
An hour earlier? Is that possible?
works for me.
Yep. Corey and I are in union negotiations from 11 to 1, at least 11 to 1. So we could do like 1:30 because we're at police department.
I've got something at 2.
Yeah.
1:15?
Wow.
Or do you want to do 2:30?
I can do any time in the afternoon on the,
Yeah, later works better for me.
how about 3:30?
3:30?
3 o'clock,
3.
How long's it going to last?
no more than 45 minutes.
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock on September 3rd
Okay.
for these two narrow issues.
And then we'll get the report draft from you by when for us to review it?
By September 9th.
By what?
Wait,
September
before the
9th.
third meeting,
Yeah.
if we're meeting on the third, when will we have
Oh.
it?
I don't think we're gonna have the report by then.
No,
So we won't even have the language from advisory by then. I think it would be tough to file the report.
No, no, no,
So-
not to file it. I thought we're meeting on the 3rd to review the draft, right? Or
So
what-
I thought it was a warrant article on the
Oh,
third.
Warrant
just the
article
warrant
and
article.
and the actual bylaw amendments.
Yeah.
Say it again, the actual bylaw amendment, what's the other thing we're
The warrant
doing?
language.
A warrant language,
Okay,
warrant article language.
and then you're doing the report, Kenny, and you say you're gonna have it to us by the 9th?
I'll
that what
have
you
the
said?
framework by the 9th.
Of September. Okay.
Yes.
And so then do you want to have a meeting scheduled for after that?
It would be the fourth Monday of September would be the 28th. We already
Eight.
have,
We're going to advisory on the 16th.
For most of our stuff, yeah.
we meet on the 14th.
But I can check with Alyssa if we want to do the, either the 23rd, the 30th. I have to go later for the other.
Why don't we do 9/14 to get people's thoughts, like directionally on the report?
The usual 11:30 to 1.
Sure.
It works for me.
I'll send in comments in your framework. I won't be here.
Okay. That work for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
All right. We have a plan.
Sorry, when do we think advisory is gonna give us the language? Sorry.
Well, motions are due,
25th.
September 25th. But I can ask,
Oh, no, okay, so
Doug.
that's a separate, whole separate, okay.
yeah, Doug Wilkins, I think is leading it, so I can reach out to Doug and see.
I think it's probably written already. It's not a
It
big
usually
change.
is.
It- I mean, they're, I can't remember. Are they trying to, they don't want to have to mail everything?
Well, I think it has to do with meeting the statutory deadlines within the bylaw, because it's so hard given the unknown mailing timeline that it takes longer and longer to mail hard copies. So whether it qualifies meeting the bylaw deadline if it's
Emailed out.
all town meeting members. Jim just gives them a little bit more time.
Yep, okay.
One thing that would be helpful is for somebody to think about like a timeline, a work plan. Because if we're going to put that in, that's going to be a work stream of the report. That's going to be a lot of thought's going to need to go into that. Can somebody take that piece of it?
I'll give it a shot, Kenny.
Great.
Can I just ask a question, circling back to the comments that were made early in the meeting? We're aiming to, complete our initial review by annual town meeting and bring the first set of revisions or suggestions at that to the spring town meeting.
I would say that should be the goal. What does everybody else think? Or does anybody disagree?
I guess I would just say it depends on how extensive they are and whether or not we might consider, as a suggestion that was made before, to have a special town meeting right after or whatever, just to deal with bylaw changes. If they're extensive, it's not going to make anybody happy.
We also might need to consider adding additional meetings. Meeting once a month is gonna make it a little tough.
Yeah. I think seeing a work plan on paper will be helpful to the discussion.
Yes.
All right, anybody have anything else? Great. All right, thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
Dave. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
I lost control of the spin of my chair there for a minute.
I'm also taking a lot of space under your seat, so.